Americans adhere to the Mayan calendar, which predicts the end of time to occur on the 21st of December of 2012.
If we go by what we understand here, everything is going to end on December 21st, 2012.
Prophecies warning of an impending doom. Are we being plunged into an era that's been talked about more than any other time? A last chance of repentance? Or is it another false prediction of the end? But if not the end, could it be the fulfillment of one of the most controversial prophecies of them all, the rapture? Each generation seems to have its prophets of the end. An Assyrian clay tablet dating as far back as 2800 BC reads, "Our earth is degenerate in these latter days. There are signs that the world is speedily coming to an end. Bribery and corruption are common. But what signs and wonders sets our time apart from all others? Furthermore, some claim it's not an end, but a new, great awakening. The final piece to a global religion. But as one rises, one falls, then where's the place for Christianity?"
We should have a world government, but only when the Messiah arrives. He wrote, and literally, any attempt to achieve world order before that time must be the work of the devil. Well, join me. I'm glad to sit here at the right hand of Satan.
As all are being gathered in the name of peace and safety, is this the time for the darkest and the most deceptive agenda of them all? Are all the prophecies pointing towards 2012 a mere coincidence? Or are we headed for another Y2K scare of the end? Guru Bhagavan says this is the deadline for human enlightenment. Perhaps we are at the breaking point for the next great step of human evolution to bring about the next spiritual era as New Age teachers proclaim. However, some scientists recommend that this is no more than a great galactic alignment. Or could this be the cornerstone for what many people have been working towards for centuries, the great Atlantis? Dan Brown writes that this is the transformation of consciousness. But can we put our faith in the quatrains of ancient predictions? And are all the prophecies pointing to an ultimate truth or a great deception against the Bible?
Now, with all the excitement being generated about what's supposed to be happening on December 21st, 2012, some say that we're going to end up with a doomsday scenario. Some say we're going to end up with a new consciousness to where we're going to have some type of spiritual awakening. Others are calling for the final days. We really need to take a good look at all the excitement being generated about 2012 and see if there really is any truth about it. Now, this is a two-part DVD set. Part 7, I should say DVD 7 and DVD 8. We have approximately 17 different sections we're going to be covering. So as I said, there's going to be a lot of information here. So that it's easier for all of us to keep on track with what we're going to be covering in each section. We're going to be covering every single section in a very specific way. First of all, we're going to take a look into the background of whatever or whoever we're going to be talking about. Next, we'll be taking a look to see if they made any prophecies in the past that had come true. Now, if they had, this is what qualifies them for step 3. We will take a look at any prophecies they made about the future or 2012 and see if any of it could possibly come to true, especially December 21st. Is there going to be doomsday? Is there going to be some type of enlightenment, or what? This is what we're going to be looking into.
Out of the 28 major cultures around the world, we all seem to be pointing to one civilization in Central America for all the end-time answers: the Maya. With possibilities open in the air, what could the Mayan lone count calendar hold? A new spiritual transformation, or the end of time as we know it? If it be their God to show them a sign of a spirituality of the world to come, through human sacrifice and offering, who then might this revelation come from? The Mayans were a Mesoamerican civilization that started around 600 to 900 AD. They were located in the region of Mexico in South America, known as the areas of Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala.
Now, the Mayans themselves were phenomenal architectures. One of the biggest buildings, which was a pyramid, that they had ever built was known as Chichen Itza. And Chichen Itza was built with certain astrological things in mind. You see, the Mayans, they didn't just understand time, they were obsessed by it. When they built Chichen Itza, you could actually measure the fall and the spring equinoxes with it. On the side of Kukulkan itself, the great pyramid, on the fall and equinox, the shadows would play an optical illusion and form a giant serpent that would go all the way down the side and connect to a serpent head at the bottom of it.
This serpent is the formation of one of the major gods of the Maya, Kukulkan. The whole ceremony was based upon Kukulkan coming down from the sky itself, descending to the earth, and there would be a cycle that would be completed. This ceremony goes on to this very day.
We have learned through various carvings and the writings in the Mayan codexes that their advanced knowledge of time and space led to meticulous designs and creations of their temples of Kukulkan, the supreme deity of the Mayans. And we see, again, as I said, a number of examples of a highly sophisticated form of hieroglyphs. And this, in fact, would be one of the hieroglyphs, an actual pictoglyph, if you want to, of Kukulkan himself. Their codexes were burnt and destroyed in these fires by Catholic priests who didn't realize just what type of level of sophistication that they were looking at. These hieroglyphs are absolutely amazing, and the pictoglyphs that go along with it. As I said, in the case of the Dresden Codex, here again we have more pictoglyphs. When we apply their knowledge of time and space, we understand the mathematics and the level of sophistication that was used to create this temple in Chichen Itza, which is dedicated to Kukulkan.
The Mayans are known for their brilliance in architecture and mathematics, and not only a culture interested in time, but obsessed by it. With 28 cultures around the world, and all known for a doomsday scenario, there's only one that sets a specific date, December 21st, 2012, and that's the Mayans.
We go into, let's say, the Aztecs, the Toltecs, the Olmecs, the Incas, and such. The reason they would be viable sources because their calendar is based on the Mayan calendar. And then we're also going to be covering sections throughout this two-part DVD set in which we'll be talking about the Hopi Indians, the Cherokees, and other Native American Indians who also base their calendars from the Mayan itself. One thing, as I said, I want you to remember is that they are the only ones that came up with a specific date. Now, they could do this because they were a very sophisticated people. And what amazes me to this very day is how many people think that just because these people lived way back when, such as, like the people in Egypt or Mesopotamia or the Sumerian cultures, people think that, oh, well, those people were just, hunter-gatherers. They had, they could barely understand, sticks and stones to take down their prey with. No. These people were highly sophisticated, and I do mean sophisticated. When we look at just the their writing system itself, it's a hieroglyphic system, which is just as sophisticated as the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs are. As a people themselves, they were incredible farmers. They had a high level of commerce and trade. They were also warriors, artists, and as I said, their writing system, it took us forever to finally understand it. But their systems of the way they did things, as I said, it reeks of a very high-cultured, very sophisticated civilization. And one of the proofs is, as I said, look at the Great Pyramid of Chichen Itza.
Chichen Itza dominated the region as a whole, as a religious center, cultural, and a ceremonial center. Doc Marquis even goes on to explain how one of the ceremonies would be human sacrifice itself, that most civilizations that worship the sun in any format were practicing human sacrifice.
Chichen Itza was also where they had an astrological observatory. You'll find out that in most Mayan civilizations, they had some sort of structure that resembles a modern-day astronomical observatory. And this observatory was known as a caracol. It's because of these caracols, which had different slits all around them, that they could measure the Venus cycles, the equinoxes, and other celestial events, such as solar eclipses and other things that would really aid in their understanding of the heavens themselves, which would help them devise one of the most sophisticated calendars in all of recorded history.
The building of Chichen Itza itself has 4 sides, and each side has 91 steps, which comes to 364 days, and the top of the building represents the 365th day of the year. The optical illusion with the shadow of the serpent connecting to the head of the Kukulkan shows their incredible ability of precision. In 1519, Hernando Cortez arrived in Mexico as the first conquistador to reach that area of South America, where he would meet the Aztec and the Mayans for the first time.
He really wasn't there for, let's just say, to shake hands or anything. The conquistadors were conquerors. They were looking for gold and valuable and land to claim for Spain and for the king and so on. Now, because of a Mayan prophecy that had been written down, and this is one of their prophecies, they had expected one of their major deities, Kukulkan himself, to come back 1,000 years later. Now, what I mean by 1,000 years later, when Hernandez Cortez, had made it to the empire, 1,000 years before that, Kukulkan was supposed to have left the Mayan Empire to return to the sea. But the promise was he would come back in 1,000 years. 1,000 years later, well, Hernandez Cortez shows up, and everyone thinks this is Kukulkan. Now, if you look at the carvings of Kukulkan and the pictographs of Kukulkan, he was really different than the Native American Indians in that part of the world. He was not dark-skinned, he was white, according to their description. He would have blue eyes, according to their prophetical descriptions again, and he would come back 1,000 years later, according to this prophecy on this time. Well, he shows up, and it's one of the greatest cases of mistaken identity in all of history. And it really was, because, as I said before, the problem was the conquistadors were not there to welcome anyone. They were conquerors. And the proof of the matter is that within 50 years of the conquistadors being there, 90% of the Mayan Empire had been completely wiped out. And to make matters worse, and again, folks, I want you to understand, when I bring in the Catholic Church, I want you to understand I'm not Catholic bashing here, but I'm giving you the whole truth of it. The Catholic priests and everything and missionaries that came along with the conquistadors disapproved of the Mayans in a major way. They did not like their lifestyle. They disapproved their culture, saying that they were heathens and all this. And of course, they, in my opinion, I believe that they were correct when they said that they disapproved of their rituals of human sacrifice. You know, the Mayans, when we're talking about human sacrifice, we're talking about children, slaves, prisoners, all of them were being sacrificed. But in the Mayan eyes, this was necessary because the sun itself was supposed to have been a living entity, and it needed blood, human blood, to sustain itself. So for them, this was a natural way of life. This was just the way the cycle of life rotated. You know, you needed to feed the sun. The sun fed you through its rays, sustained the land. Kukulkan would descend from the heavens and complete these cycles. So it was a necessary thing because in their culture, in the Mayan culture, the great gods formed man out of blood and corn. They would ground the corn and mix it together. And this is how man was formed. And it's to this very day that corn is considered one of the most sacred plants in the Mayan tradition. This is what we were created from. You will not abuse corn in any form or fashion. This is just the way the Mayans saw things. The Catholic priests declared that these human sacrifices were of the devil. And so they went to great pains to make sure that the Mayans would be converted over to Catholicism. And those that did not cooperate usually were either beheaded or burned at the stake as heretics. And in an overnight event, in order to wipe out all memories of the Mayan Empire and their beliefs and all that they've stood for more than 1,000 years, they took all the books, all the ancient writings of the Mayans, and threw them in a giant fire. You wipe out a culture's background and any information about them, it's much easier to get them not just converted, but to keep them, because they've got no background to go to anymore. Now, one Catholic priest in particular, for some reason, was feeling very sympathetic towards what was going on, and he was able to rescue 4 of the codexes from the Mayan Empire, and only 4. Unfortunately, that rich tapestry of Mayan knowledge is forever lost to us. What we do know of their empire is through, you know, their carvings on the temple walls, various hieroglyphs, and of course the 4 books, the codexes that actually survived.
Not only by the archaeological evidences, hieroglyphs, and codices that survive to this very day, a Spanish Catholic bishop wrote the following account of a human sacrifice. If his heart were to be taken out, they brought him to the court with a great show and a large company of people. They seized the poor creature they were sacrificing, very swiftly laid his back on the stone. At this, the executioner approached with a stone knife and very skillfully made a cruel incision. Then he reached in and, seizing the heart like a ravening tiger, tore out the living heart. This he gave to the priest on a plate, who hurried to anoint the faces of the idols with the fresh blood. The Mayans believed their god needed to be sustained by human blood, because man was created by blood with a mixture of corn. This is how the Mayans were, and as with any religion, everyone has their own opinion. Interesting to say at the least, considering how sophisticated the Mayans were.
Something odd did happen. One Catholic priest, now I don't think anyone knows who that was, he had some sympathy on what they were doing and managed to sneak out 4 of the Mayan books that had, their ancient drawing, their knowledge and everything on it. And eventually they ended up in different museums around the world. Those 4 books, one is known as the Dresden Codex, the Grolier Codex, the Madrid Codex, and the one that's in Paris, the Paris Codex. Now, it's when we go into these particular 4 books that we find out that there was supposed to be some type of doomsday scenario coming. Now, written on long pieces of paper made from the inner bark of big trees. And some of these codices measured up to 22 feet in length, and they'd fold them like an accordion. But can you imagine writing on something that just continued for 22 feet long? It's incredible. And yet, the Catholic priest said that these writings, these hieroglyphs, were works of the devil. Yet European scholars knew that there was more to these codexes than just met the eye. Now, as I said before, it took quite a while to decipher the ancient language and hieroglyphs of the Mayans. But it was 1739 that Johann Goetze, who was the head of the Royal Saxon Library in Dresden, found one of the codexes, well, that one in particular, it's known as the Dresden Codex. He bought it from a private owner, and it was put in their library in Dresden, Germany, and it just sat there and gathered dust. I mean, it literally speaking, it sat there till 1880, till a man known as Ernst Fosterman, who found the codex, just sitting there, covered with dust, and he did an exhaustive study into this particular book. Now, it took him and the others quite a number of years, but they eventually was able to break the hieroglyphic codes, the symbols themselves of the Mayan Empire. And this is where, of course, they discovered in the writings themselves now that they had a very sophisticated level of astronomical predictions. As I said, eclipses, lunar cycles, the Venus cycle, and they could predict I don't know how many different astrological things thousands of years down the road, because they understood time and how it worked, at least on a level that we're just beginning to understand.
The Mayan culture has approximately 20 different calendars, but one in particular rises above them all and deserves our attention. A combination of 3 in 1, the long count calendar, which is broken down into 18 months and 20 days. But the 5 days to equal the 365 are considered to be very unlucky days, and unless of an emergency, you are not even to leave your own home. It is now reported that their calendar is 1/10,000th of a second more accurate than our own, and only the atomic clock has been proven to be more accurate.
Now, the second calendar the first part of the calendar, as I said before, it's known as a hob. This measures the 360 days. Now, there's a second part to this calendar, as you can see. It's known as the Tolkien. It consists of 20-day cycles through 13 times. In other words, 13 times 20 comes out to be 260 days. And every single section has a specific measurement to it. In other words, they took time itself and started understanding that there were cycles to it, things that could be measured. And one example would be like the gestation period of a pregnant lady would be 260 days. This was something that they saw, something they understood. So we're looking at a 260-day cycle here now, because this is what life tells us. This is one of the measurements they would buy. This is how one of the ways that they created their calendar. And another thing that they did with their calendar, each day of the Tolkien that we're just talking about, those sections, they were used to give the names of someone who was just born. They would use it also to determine what was the best time for a battle, best time for marriages, and as I said, they could use it for their astrological observations also. Now, the whole thing comes out to be what's known as the calendar round or the long count calendar. This is where you use the hob and the Tolkien and combine it together on a third wheel, which is where we come up with the long count calendar. And this is where we get the doomsday scenario. Now, the long count calendar measures, again, a specific time. In this case, it's 5,125 years in order for this calendar to come completely around. Now, according to the mythological belief, if you understand the cycles of the Mayans, you know, we have to bring it back 4 cycles and such ago. Actually 5, considering we're just about to end the 5th cycle. According to the Mayan belief system, mankind would have been born somewhere around 23,163 BC. The fourth cycle, or the last one, that supposedly ended on August 13, 3114 BC. Now, add 5,125 years to that, and we come up with the Mayan date, the last day of December 21st, 2012. This is how we got that date. It's because the 5th cycle, according to them, has come to an end, and that ends on that date. Now, understand that in the Mayan belief system, every 20 years is measured by certain signs and prophecies within it. In other words, every 20 years, you can tell certain things are always going to happen, because according to them, time is not just linear. It doesn't just go in a straight line as we in Western civilization see time as. They also see it as coming around in a cycle. In other words, what happened in the past is going to come back again to repeat itself. Now, these cycles of 20 years are known as cartoons, okay? And on the Mayan long count calendar, there are 260 of these cartoons. So in other words, time is going to repeat itself over and over again. Those events that had happened in the past are going to happen, sure enough, in the future. Unfortunately, at one point in Mayan history, this would also serve possibly as a self-fulfilling prophecy.
These 260 cartoons were written by a Mayan priest, Chalam Balam. But what do these predictions claim? Cartoon 13 goes on to say, "This is a time of total collapse where everything is lost. It is the time of the judgment of God. There will be epidemics and plagues and then famines. Governments will be lost to foreigners and wise men, and prophets will be lost. This is what happened in 1520 when Cortez overthrew the Mayan Empire and the whole civilization of the Mayans were almost destroyed. And then again it cycled through in 1776. This is during the American and French revolutions. An old government lost and a new one would be born.
Now when we go to the fifth cycle, let's go through a couple of these. According to the predictions of the fifth cycle, it says, a time of misfortune, rulers and their subjects separate. The people lose faith in their leaders. Leaders may be harshly treated, even hung. There is also an abundance of snakes, a great famine, and few birds during this period. Now, this particular cartoon, Cartoon 5, cycled through in 1855 through 1875, that 20-year period. And it was the same 20-year period in which you had the Civil War, in which the Reunion was dissolved, and in which Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. So on the surface, it certainly does look as this Cartoon 5, along with its predictions, had come true. Now, Cartoon 8 saw the destruction of the Mayan Empire. Plus, in 1960, when this cartoon came back again, it saw the political assassinations and the Vietnam War, which led to, obviously, deep divisions in America. Now, accordingly, the cartoon said, a time of demolition and destruction among the governors, an end to greed, but much fighting. A time to settle in a new place. A time to settle in a new place. And that's what happened to the Mayans. No one knows for certain why it happened, but suddenly they vanished overnight. And it's probably because of one of these self-fulfilling prophecies. Remember, these things measure a 20-year time period, and there's 260 of them. They could very well, Shalom Balaam, the high priest, could very well have written a self-fulfilling prophecy which would destroy the Mayan Empire without anyone even realizing it. When we go to the sixth cartoon, the prophecies there says that there's going to be a time of bad government and deceptive government. There's also starvation and famine. Well, this particular cartoon cycled through back in 1973 all the way through 1993. And it was during that time we had Watergate, the Contra affair, and the crusade to end hunger in Africa. So it actually fits perfectly in those events with this cartoon. And when we look at Cartoon 4's prediction, it calls for the supreme deity to return to the earth and usher in a new era. And would you like to take a guess at when this supreme deity is supposed to arrive? If you said December 21st, 2012, that would be true, because according to Cartoon 4, it cycles all the way through from 1993 all the way to the end of 2012. So we could very well be seeing the predictions of Cartoon 4 happening right here before our very eyes. On December 21st, every year, that is what's known as the solstice, where we see the great shadow of the sun and such setting and rising in specific locations. This was measured by the Mayans. This is also measured at Stonehenge by the ancient Druids. The Egyptians knew about this and other civilizations because they were all sun worshippers. As we just pointed out, one cycle on the Mayan long count calendar is 5,125 years in length, and that 4 of them have already happened. Now, accordingly, if we go by the 5th cycle, which is going to be ended very soon, that's supposed to be on December 21st, 2012. Do we know this is going to happen for certain? We're not positive. No one could be positive of that. But one thing that is interesting, we look at this 26,000 year cycle that we're passing through right now. That's the exact length of time it takes for the precession of the Earth to happen. In other words, the wobble. See, the Earth does have a wobble to it, and you also see that it bulges out at the center because of the forces of gravity. But how could the Mayans understand this precession, this wobble of the Earth, correct itself every 26,000 years? How could they have known that? And yet, what we do know, and it's from the Popol Vuh, which is the Mayan Bible, that much of this information comes from. We also know that, according to the Popol Vuh, there's a dark rift in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Now, according to the understanding of the Mayan system, this dark rift, which is in the middle, as I said, of our own galaxy, this dark rift is actually the entrance to the underworld. This is where our planet, along with the sun, is going to be perfectly aligned with this dark region of space in the center of the galaxy. And this happens, this astrological event happens only once every 26,000 years. Again, the Mayans' calendar was so sophisticated they could point out where the moon, the sun, planets, galaxies and such would be aligned on specific dates. And here we have, whether it's a coincidence or not, the precession, the wobble of the Earth, will correct itself on December 21st, 2012, as it faces the dark rift, the dark center of our galaxy, along with the sun, which will be in perfect alignment with it. So everything will be perfectly aligned with this dark rift, the underworld, according to the Mayan civilization, which is supposed to occur on December 21st, 2012. And this is where we get the story of the hero twin myth. You see, it was believed that First Father, as he was called by the Mayan Empire, was challenged to a ball game by the Dark Lords of the underworld. Well, First Father took up the challenge, but when he arrived in the underworld, instead of the game being played, the Dark Lords betrayed him and had him murdered. Well, his sons, who became known as the hero twins in that myth, rescued their father by playing this ball game and defeating the Dark Lords. And after they did that, they were able to resurrect First Father. Now, it's interesting that when we look at the ball court in Chichen Itza, it looks like a physical representation of that myth itself, because the ball court itself is that long ball court that we find in the story. The two opposing sides are trying to hit this one ball through the circle. In one of those walls, there's two circles, one on each side of the ball court. The idea is you have to hit that ball without using your hands through the circle. And whoever put the ball through that circle would win. Now, that circle represents the center of the galaxy where First Father went through to play this ball game. And it was at the center of this dark rift was where First Father was supposedly murdered. But after this game was played between the Dark Lords and the twins, this is where, and after they were able to bring First Father back. So this is why they had two different teams. And usually these teams were made up of people who had lost some battle to the Mayan empires. In other words, they were slaves or warriors that just had been brought and taken. They would be forced to play this ball game, and it used to be believed that whoever lost the game were the ones that was taken and sacrificed Now, according to what some archaeologists are being led to believe, they think it might have been the winners who were actually sacrificed, because if you won the game, you were considered to be a worthy sacrifice. Yeah, there's a lot of controversy about it, but the point is, this is where we actually get the ball court from. It's actually a perfect reenactment of the hero twin myth. If we go by Cartoon 2's prophecies, it says, "For half there will be food, for others misfortune, a time of the end of the word of God, a time for uniting for a cause." Now this could very well be interpreted as events that are going to happen during the tribulation period. A lot of this does sound very familiar when you think about it along scriptural lines. Now, according to the last page of the Dresden Codex, the celestial dragon is coming across the top page, opening its mouth and pouring out endless streams of water upon the earth. You will also see the moon and the sun symbol for the hero twin gods. They themselves are holding these giant vases and turning them upside down, and vast amounts of water are just inundating the land. And then there's, in the center of it, one of their earth goddesses who also has an upturned jar where great waters are being spilled upon the earth below. And beneath it all is one of the Dark Lords of the underworld. He's actually waiting there to gather up the souls of those people who have died. Now, what we do know of this scene, if you look at the top of the Dresden Codex on that last page, you will see 15 hieroglyphs on it. Unfortunately, more than half of them have been lost due to time. But what remains of those 15 hieroglyphs, it says, "Black on high, black earth." That's what we know of what remains. So it could talk about that warning alone about the destruction of earth and possible time itself, because if we go by what we understand here, everything is going to end on December 21st, 2012. The big question is there an alien connection to all this? Now, I know this may sound a bit bizarre, but for those of you who may have seen and been watching crop circles, you know, those mysterious drawings that's done in wheat fields or hay fields throughout the world, but mainly along the Salisbury Plains in England. There is the Mayan long count calendar that's been drawn. The Hob and the Tolkien has also been drawn. And then there's the Masonic symbol for the galactic center of our universe. That's also been drawn. So the question is there an alien connection to this? The big question is anything going to happen on December 21st, 2012? We will answer that question more as we move along in this series. Now, it was somewhere back in the late 60s, early 70s, when I first started hearing about the plans that the Illuminati had for 2012. Now, that might seem a little odd, because at that point, that would have been about 40 years plus down the road. But as we've already demonstrated throughout this DVD series, I believe in DVD 1, which was the arrival of the Antichrist, and other places throughout the series, the plans of the Illuminati, a lot of them, are very long-ranged plans. And since they believe in reincarnation, which means they're going to come back to continue these long-range plans, they really don't care how long-range they are. They're going to come back to complete them anyways. So this brings us to 2012 now and what's going on with their plans.
All right. Well, you spoke of in the mind section, part 1, on several different calendars we have. Let's pick in particular the long count calendar. Okay. It goes on to say that the end is December 21st, 2012.
Right.
What's your perspective on all this?
Okay, the calendar itself does cycle through every 5,125 years. And this time when it cycles through and ends, it's going to stop on December 21st, 2012. Does the world end then? No. That is not what the calendar states. Now, just because it cycles through and ends on that date does not suddenly mean the world is going to come to a crashing end. As a matter of fact, the Mayans said nothing at all about that date. As far as we know, that calendar is simply going to start up again, and we wait another 5,125 years until it ends and then starts again. There's nothing more to it than just that. Nothing in the calendar says anything.
All right. Correct me if I'm wrong, though, but looking through my notes here, you mentioned that the Dresden Codex also predicts the end of the world. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Now, the Dresden Codex, let me show you the page we had been speaking about before.
Mm-hmm.
Here we have on that picture of Kukulkan, the great serpent god.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yes, he's pouring vast amounts of water down upon the earth. We have the hero twin gods represented by the star and by the sun and the moon. And notice their jugs are turned over and great waters are pouring down upon the land also.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the one of the earth goddesses of the Mayan religion, again, great water coming down. And here we have one of the lords of the underworld waiting to gather the souls. Now, the reason people believe that this could represent some type of flood or inundation is because at the top of that page, it does say black earth and black on high. But we don't know what the rest of it says because half of those hieroglyphs are missing. It's anyone's guess, really, what the rest of it says. So the whole of it, as far as the flood part of it, cannot be accepted simply because the Bible instructs us that after God had flooded the earth, he himself stated he would never punish the earth like that ever again. And as a covenant, as a personal reminder to himself, he created the rainbow. And he said, every time I look upon these rainbows, it will remind me that I have a covenant between myself and my creation. So no, even if the Dresden Codex was definitively speaking about a flood, the answer would still be no, because it is contrary to the Word of God.
So you're saying it's not even possible that the world could end because of a flood. Your personal opinion, and based upon the biblical scriptures, that this world isn't going to end off a great flood.
Well, it's not my opinion, it's God's opinion.
Right.
I'm just repeating what he wrote. Yeah.
Marquis presented to us the Illuminati's reliance on the role of reincarnation in our existence, and he presented to us the Mayan civilization's calendar cycle of 5,125 years. If we're approaching the end of the fifth cycle, are we really 26,000 years into our existence? Or is this just another scheme of the old devil for us to believe in evolution? Where is this plan coming from? Is it the plan for man to become God? Or are we entering into a new age of spirituality? But the experts on the Bible say that if you add up the genealogies, we're only a little more than 6,000 years into existence. So is this the truth that can set us free, or a lie that can set us into bondage?
What in the world does this skull you have to do with anything you have here?
This skull is a perfect life-size duplicate of a crystal skull that was found in the Mesoamerican regions. Now, there's an interesting prophecy that deals with 13 crystal skulls, and I have a photo here that will show you the crystal skulls that have already been found. Now, there's supposed to be 13 crystal skulls according to this prophecy. And here you can see the first one there. and the other 7 that have been found thus far. All right. Now, according to this prophecy, 13 crystal skulls are supposed to be brought together. And if they are brought together before December 21st, 2012, they will somehow give us the information that will help us prevent the doom and gloom scenario that some people say is going to happen. Now, we do know that crystal skulls, well, crystal in general, has a resonance quality to it, vibrations. And it's the same if you think back to, the old phonographic records. We used to place, a handle with the needle on it. That diamond would vibrate, okay, with the resonance. And that's how it would decipher the information on that phonograph player. So we know crystals, and scientists are already experimenting with this in a big way. We know crystals, because of their resonance, their resonant quality, they can store information. Now, there are some very, and I must say, wild claims going about right now that some people have taken crystal skulls and they've been shining light through it, and supposedly they can see these images or symbols, and supposedly they're saying this is the knowledge that we're supposed to be looking for. Okay, I'll be honest, I haven't seen it yet.
Would that be a form of scrying?
Actually, yes. And what's interesting, speaking of scrying, I'm glad you brought it up. See, we have a flyer here that dealt with the legends of the 13 crystal skulls. Now, again, they consider that these crystal skulls have and store all this hidden knowledge and information from possible aliens and all this type of stuff. Okay?
All right. And picture you in this one right here. All of these 8 schools, but you mentioned 13. Has all 13 of them been found, or is this the only 8 right here?
No, only 8, as far as I know, have been found. But about 6 months ago, I heard that there's a possible 9th one that has been located. Now, I'm still waiting on the information on this. But if that 9th one is found, it's going to be really interesting, because that means a lot of people are desperately scouring around the earth to try to find these other 5 missing ones before, supposedly we have doom and gloom.
Okay. But let's just assume for a second, all 13's found by different people. We bring them together, but then what? What's next? I mean, what happens if we bring them all together?
Well, that's just it. No one knows for sure. We're not even sure of the placement. What some people are saying, we were supposed to put 12 in a circle, excuse me, the 13th one in the center, and somehow maybe some type of Indiana Jones things is supposed to happen here, and maybe lights and a laser show begins, who knows, and maybe all the information suddenly bursts out in a 3D or 4D holographic images and everything. But no one knows, because the truth of the matter is there's absolutely no information about this. Now the story is interesting, because the first crystal skull that was found in the early 1900s, the very turn of the century, right around there. It was only after that was found that someone, somehow, I don't know how, came up and showed what the ancient prophecy stated about 13 crystal skulls. And again, here we have another problem, because we don't know which came first in this situation, the chicken or the egg. We don't know if the prophecies were made first and then they created the skulls, or if the skulls came and then someone wrote about the prophecy. No one knows. cave in which Ursula would be born in was located by the River Nid in Knaresborough, North Yorkshire in England. There was a well that would be streaming water down. This well to this very day is known as the petrifying well. Reportedly, it has miraculous powers. One of those powers they claim is if you were to string something along the waters, as it would drip down, eventually whatever the object was would become petrified like stone. You would then take this object home and it would act as some type of blessing or good luck symbol for you. But this would be the area in which, during the middle of a thunderstorm, Ursula Southhill, who would eventually become known as Mother Shipton, would be born.
Some of the most heated and debated prophecies of them all come from northern England. They fall under the name Mother Shipton. Outcasted by society, she withdrew to what is now known today as Shipton's Cave. This is where it is rumored where she penned her major prophecies. Did she predict some of our most technological advances of our day from over 5 centuries ago? Perhaps she even had a vision of the end.
The extraordinary circumstances revolved around the birth of Ursula Southhill would serve as a hallmark for the rest of her life, because the rest of her life would indeed be most bizarre. Mother Shipton, when she was born, was called Ursula Southhill. She was the illegitimate child of a 15-year-old girl who was considered to be a prostitute. This young girl could have had a very tragic end to her life because her mother, Agatha, had been put on trial because the villagers had called her and claimed she was a prostitute. However, Agatha was a very strong-willed and determined young lady. When faced by the judge who was making these accusations against her, she looked straight at the judge and said, "How can you accuse me of these crimes when 2 of your own servant girls are pregnant and also unwed like I am?" Well, needless to say, the charges were dropped. However, the circumstances surrounding Mother Shipton's birth is even stranger than her life. Accordingly, she was born in something like this, just a cave, because her mother was unmarried. She had no means or anything. According to the reports of the midwives, in 1488, Ursula Southhill was born during the middle of a storm. This storm was raging and thunder was crashing all over the place. But when Ursula was born and she came out, she didn't cry like a normal child. Instead, she jeered and cackled and started laughing. Immediately, once that happened, the thunder and the storm suddenly became very quiet, almost as if to signal some type of prophetical event had just happened. At an early age, Ursula demonstrated that she had unusual powers. She could foresee the future, and she made predictions that were very, very accurate. However, being that this was the 15th century, there was many people who was claiming that she had mated with the devil. Her mother had, and, that's why Ursula had these powers. Sad enough, when Ursula was to, her mother abandoned her because she thought maybe she was wrong when she brought her child into this life, because she wasn't married, and back then that would have been considered prostitution. So she abandoned her child and she went to a convent to supposedly repent of her sins for the rest of her life. However, as time went on, even Ursula eventually found happiness. When she was 24 years old, she was married to Toby Shipton, who was a local carpenter, and this would have been around 1512 near York, where she was from. Now, again, her reputation worked against her because a lot of people stated the only reason he would marry such an ugly person was because Ursula had made a love potion and gave it to Tony Shipton. That's how and why he married her. Now, her powers of prophecy, literally, she used it, not for any self-gain or anything. She helped a lot of people from where she was at, and eventually, because of how effective her prophecies and other treatments she had done for the villagers, how powerful her prophecy was, she was gaining a quick reputation throughout all of England, and people all over the countryside would spend hours and days just trying to get to her so she would predict their future for them.
A prophecy that would come to pass is now referred to as the Uzay Bridge prophecy. She penned, "Water shall come over Uzay Bridge, and a windmill shall be set upon a tower, and an elm tree shall lie at every man's door." Doc Marquis would go on to suggest that an invention that we lean so heavily upon today was the modern marvel of its time. In the city of York, a pipe system would bring water to everyone's home.
For these people, this was a new innovation. We have running water in pipes to our home. Now, the pipes, interesting enough, were laid across the bridge of the river Uzay, and a windmill had actually drawn up the water that would run into the pipes and into everyone's home. Now, these pipes were made out of hollowed out elm trees. Now, the reason it was elm trees because elm tree is one of those trees that will not decay because of water. So we look at the Uzay Bridge prophecy had it actually happen. She stated water would come over Uzay Bridge, and it did through the pipes, and a windmill shall be set upon a tower. And that's how the water was drawn up, was through this windmill, and an elm tree shall be at every man's door. And it was because that's what the pipes were made out of. Now, she made another prophecy involving Uzay Bridge, and this is how it goes. Before Uzay Bridge and Trinity Church meet, what is built in the day shall fall in the night, till the highest stone of the church be the lowest stone on the bridge. Now, the steeple of Trinity Church fell during a nighttime thunderstorm. And parts of the steeple actually, just fell on Uzay Bridge and broke it up. Now, some of the stones from the steeple itself was used to rebuild Uzay Bridge. So, the prophecy she stated about Uzay Bridge actually came to pass. Remember, she said, before Uzay Bridge and Trinity Church meet, what is built in the day shall fall in the night, till the highest stone of the church be the lowest stone of the bridge. It was those fallen stones from Trinity steeple that was used to rebuild the bridge. The Minister Yard prophecy. When there is a Lord Mayor living in Minister Yard, let him beware of a stab. Interesting enough, a Lord Mayor did come and lived in Minister Yard, and he was stabbed 3 times and died. If we go by what Mother Shipton stated, the Minister Yard prophecy had actually come to pass.
Mother Shipton would go on to record a prophecy concerning King Henry VIII and the Battle of the Spurs. She wrote, "When the English lion shall set his paw upon the Gallic shore, then shall the lilies begin to droop for fear. There shall be much weeping and wailing amongst the ladies of that country, because the princely eagle shall join with the lion to tread down all that oppose them. And though many Sagittaries shall appear in defense of the lilies, yet shall they not prevail, because the dull animal of the north shall put them to confusion. Marquis goes on to describe how people believe the English line is a reference to King Henry VIII. The lilies were the emblem of France. The princely eagle was Maximilian of Austria. Sagittarius, like the zodiac sign of Sagittarius, half man and half horse, and an archer was the French cavalry.
And the dull animal of the north were the English soldiers who were dragged out of the inns from all across the country. And it was decided that they were dull and grumbling about the weather, much as British soldiers always do. But when we look together at the whole of this, we find out that all of it actually does line up with the prophecy of the Battle of the Spurs. Now, there was another prophecy involving Thomas Wolsey. He was a Catholic priest who eventually became known as Cardinal Wolsey. Now, he was King Henry VIII's personal advisor, and he was the one who encouraged him to fight in the Battle of the Spurs to begin with. Now, quite honestly, when you get into the background of Cardinal Wolsey, you'll find out that there was a lot of greed and corruption going on with him. But then again, you know, we're talking of King Henry VIII's court, so there was a lot of greed and corruption going on anyways. Now, eventually, because of his contribution to the war as the advisor to King Henry VIII, Cardinal Wolsey became the Lord Chancellor of England, and this was during the wartime. He was elevated to the Cardinal of Rome by the Pope, and this was supposed to be as, you know, a reward for everything he had done for the crown. He then eventually lived like a prince with a huge retinue that was given to him by King Henry VIII. He himself had built, that would have been Hampton Court. Hampton Court still exists to this very day, and Hampton Court was the most lush palace in existence at that time. This was better than any of the castles King Henry VIII lived in, but Cardinal Wolsey, being who he was in it for the pomp and pageantry of it all, and he made sure that if you're going to live like a prince, you got to have a palace, you know, fit for one. And he really spent millions just to put this place up alone. Now, Mother Shipton's prophecy against him goes as follows, and this was against Cardinal Wolsey. Now shall the mighted peacock first begin to plume, whose train shall make a great show in the world for a time, but shall afterwards vanish away, and his great honor come to nothing. Now, in another prophecy against Cardinal Wolsey, Mother Shipton said this, that he would see the city of York, but never enter into it. And this is very important because, you see, during the day of King Henry VIII, the Spanish Inquisition was still going, and people could be tried and executed for practicing witchcraft, or just for being accused of practicing witchcraft. Now, Cardinal Wolsey, for some reason, he hated Mother Shipton. I mean, he really hated her. He himself stated he was going to personally have her arrested. I mean, he was going to go there and do it himself, have her arrested and burnt as a witch at the stake. One of her prophecies stated that he would indeed come and see the city of York, but he would never set foot in it. Interesting enough, when he was being driven in his carriage to go to York City, so he could personally take Mother Shipton and have her tried and executed as a witch, 10 miles out of the city, before he reached it, there was this tower they came across. And he climbed up it to see how far they were, and he could see from that great height that the city of York was only 10 miles away. However, when he came down, he had been given orders on parchment that was given to him. He was given orders by King Henry VIII himself to return back to the court because he was being charged with treason and corruption. Following his orders, Cardinal Wolsey got in the carriage, turned around, and made his way back to the court of Henry VIII, but he never made it because he died along the way. And this fulfills exactly what Mother Shipton's prophecy stated. He would see York, but he would never step inside of it. Mother Shipton also saw the dissolution of the Catholic monasteries in England. This is what she wrote about them, or I should say what was written about them. When the cow doth ride the bull, then priest beware thy skull. And when the lower shrubs do fall, the great trees quickly follow shall. The mitred peacock's lofty pride shall to his master be a guide. And one great court to pass shall bring what was never done by any king. The poor shall grieve to see thy day, and who did feast must fast and pray. Fate so decreed their overthrow, witches brought pride, and pride brought woe. You see, the Catholic monasteries were dissolved by King Henry VIII himself and handed over to the nobility and wealthy people of England. This was mainly done because the Catholic Church refused to grant Henry VIII, I believe it was a second divorce. So his solution to the problem was, I'm the king, I'm throwing them out of my country. And that's exactly what he did. That's why all the monasteries were looted, raided, and everything. Mother Shipton also foresaw her own death in 1561, and it is thought she was buried in unconsecrated ground somewhere on the outskirts of York. She saw the defeat of the Spanish Armada under the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. She also foresaw the beheading of King Charles I in 1649. The Great Plague of London in 1665 she foresaw. Now this Great Fire of London, this was completely devastating, folks. I mean, it was started in a bakery owned by a French baker. Thousands of homes were burnt down. Hundreds of streets were completely destroyed. 86 churches in that area alone was also destroyed by the fire. And parts of St. Paul's Cathedral was also burned. Yet, Mother Shipton had foresaw all these things. She also foresaw the birth of Henry's only surviving son, Edward VI. She said, "For a sweet pious prince make room, and in each kirk," now a kirk, that's a Scottish word for church, "and in each kirk prepare a room. For this prince that shall never be born, shall make the shaven heads forlorn." Now, Edward VI, as I said, he was the only son of Henry VIII. He was not born through natural means. He was born through a very crude method of what we would call a cesarean section, but unfortunately, because of it, his mother, Jane Seymour, died giving birth. Now, Edward would grow to be a Protestant, and this made the Catholic Church priests very, very worried, because this kid would eventually become the King of England, and he was Protestant and not Catholic. And this is why, you know, the part in the prophecy about the shaven heads. He also foresaw, I should say, Mother Shipton also foresaw the rise of Lady Jane Grey. She said, "A virtuous lady then shall die, for being raised up so high. Her death shall cause another joy, who will the kingdom much annoy." Now, Edward VI left his throne, when he died, to his cousin, Lady Jane Grey. The reason he gave it to her was because she was Protestant. His sister, who would have been the rightful queen, who was Mary, was a staunch Catholic. And he did not want England to fall into the hands of Catholicism. So he, by royal declaration, made Lady Jane Grey the successor to the throne. Now, she would become the shortest reigned monarch in English history. She reigned only 9 days. And that's because Mary was able to raise up an army and depose Lady Jane Grey. Mary would eventually gain a horrific reputation, and to this very day, she's still known as Bloody Queen Mary. And that's because she persecuted Protestants endlessly. The truth of the matter is, back then, anyone during her reign who did not convert over to Catholicism was either burnt at the stake or hung. This is the part of the prophecy of Mother Shipton where she said, who will the kingdom much annoy. She was a heartless person. She had no problem burning or hanging, let alone torturing, those people who she believed would not follow what she called the true faith. Mother Shipton wrote more about Bloody Queen Mary's reign and her death. This is what she said. Alecto next assumes the crown, and Midas shall rise and heads fall down, and streams of blood run Smithfield down. England shall join in leagues with Spain, which some to hinder strive in vain. Alecto then shall from life retire, and pontifical priests retire. Now, Alecto was one of the Greek Furies in Greek mythology. She was one of the Furies of vengeance. Those Protestants who were martyred and executed were murdered on an area in England, a particular field known as Smithfield Down, just as Mother Shipton stated. Now, England did join in league with Spain when Bloody Queen Mary married Philip of Spain. When Alecto, or Queen Mary, died in November 17th on 1558, her pontifical priest, her confessor and all that, Cardinal Pole, died hours later. So that, again, the part of the prophecy there of Mother Shipton once again had come to pass. She had also foreseen one of the most influential kings as far as the Bible goes, and that would be King James I of England, who came to the throne in 1603, and by the time 1611 had come, the great scholars who had come together had created what we now know, in God be praised, what we have nowadays as the King James Bible of 1611.
Was Mother Shipton referring to the end times as the Bible proclaims? She foreseen technological advances followed by great destruction for the earth. She wrote, "Carriages without horses shall go, and accidents fill the world with woe." Could this be referring to automobiles and possible car accidents? She penned as well, "Around the world thoughts shall fly in the twinkling of an eye." Is this speaking of television and the internet? Also, underwater men shall walk, shall ride, shall sleep and talk. Possibilities assume this is speaking of submarines. Even more, she wrote. In the air men shall be seen, and white and black and green. Could this be referring to airplanes? When boats like fishes swim beneath the sea, when men like birds shall scour the sky, then half the world deep drenched in blood shall die.
Flee to the mountains and the dens, to bog and forest and wild fens. For storms will rage and oceans roar, when Gabriel stands on sea and shore. And as he blows his wondrous horn, old world dies and new be born. Now, the timing is what we need to take a good look at here, because once all these technological advances happen, the next set of her prophecies are supposed to come true. She said, for the next part, half the world will be drenched in blood. Now, could this be the great martyred period that's going to happen during the tribulation period? It also says, men shall flee to the mountains, and according to the scriptures, Matthew chapter 24:16, Mark 13:14, Luke 21:21, because of the great martyrdom that's going to happen because of the Antichrist. Once he sits upon the temple of God, he's going to proclaim himself to be God in the Temple Mount on Jerusalem himself. So, we know once these events happen, yeah, there's going to be great martyrdom, but just like Mother Shipton's prophesies. And then the third thing we really need to take a look at, she also says that Gabriel's horn shall be sounded. So, Mother Shipton's prophecy, when it comes to just this section alone, is very, very interesting when we line it up with the Holy Scriptures. Now, Mother Shipton had another prophecy, and she wrote down, for 7 days and 7 nights, man will watch this awesome sight. The tides will rise beyond their ken to bite away the shores, and then the mountains will begin to roar, an earthquake split the plain to shore, and flooding waters rushing in will the flood and land with such a din. And all these things are prophesied in the book of Revelation. She also goes on to say, man flees in terrors from the floods, and kills and rapes and lies in blood. And spilling blood by mankind's hands will stain and bitter many lands. Man forgets and smiles and carries on to apply himself. Too late, for mankind has earned deserved fate. Now, these events could be the pouring out of the wrath of God during the tribulation period. She goes on to state, and in some far-off distant land, some men, oh such a tiny band, will have to leave their solid mount and span the earth, those few to count. Who survives this, and then begins the human race again. Now, could these survivors, the very few in numbers that you just mentioned, could these be the people that are saved during the tribulation period time and make it all the way to the end? What we know of Mother Shipton came down through the reports and writings of a lady known as Joanne Walker. She died at 94. It would be in 1561 that Mother Shipton, at the ripe old age of 73, would pass away. However, her extraordinary life and those of her prophecies would follow her all the way through our day and age. Well, Mother Shipton is one of the most intriguing, I think, prophets of all time. She is nowadays, to most people, in our day and age, an enigma. She's really unknown to so many people, and her prophecies were not only accurate, but they were more accurate than just about any prophet, or I should say so-called prophet, like Nostradamus, Edgar Casey, Gene Dixon, Mother Shipton, 400 or 500 years ago, and she was more accurate than any of them. And And the thing I really like about her is that for a lady who had such a difficult life, she still turned out to be a kind person. And her prophecies, for the most part, actually did come to pass, the ones way back when. Now, she prophesied that towards the end of this day and age, if things were supposed to, the old doom and gloom scenario, if things were supposed to happen, then there would first have to be certain technological advances that we would easily be able to recognize, such as when she talked about horseless carriages and all that, of course, which was the automobiles. Then she also talked about airplanes, submarines, and all this. So that was a definitive marker in time that we were supposed to look out for, because as soon as that happened, shortly after that, we would start seeing this doomsday scenario happen. And part of the doomsday scenario she predicted is that half the world would be deep drenched in blood. Now, it's interesting that she used that phraseology, and especially for the period of time, because that's not only very close to 2012, but that could also be very reflective of the tribulation period as spoken of in the book of Revelation. Now, exactly how much, or if any, of what she said pertaining to what I believe may be a glimpse into the tribulation period, how much of that could be true and may not be true, I honestly don't know. Simply because, the tribulation period hasn't arrived yet. We just don't know. But the timing is what is intriguing. Because if we take a look when the technological advances had happened, and the period of time shortly after that, and then when all this doomsday scenario from her would happen, it's very close to the biblical timeline, which we will get into, as I said, in the next DVD at the end with the question and answers. It lines up very close. So it's Mother Shipton and only one other prophet that really has given me pause for consideration here. As far as did she say anything about the earth is going to come to a crashing end like so many others have? No, she never said that. All she did was give us a time period to look towards. She did not give us a date. Just like, the Mayans did give us a date, but they did not say it's a doomsday thing. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about Ursula Southhill, who became known as Mother Shipton, do not associate her with a doom and gloom scenario that's going to happen exactly on December 21st, 2012. We look at her prophecies. They were very true in her day and age. We look at a number of her future prophecies, the ones she had named thus far for this day and age, they have come to pass. Now, this next one just is not going to slip into 2012 because she never said 2012, but it does fit in with a possible biblical scenario as far as the timelines go.
One of the most mysterious and darkest aspects that most of the Doomsday Prophets have in common, from the Hopi Indians to our modern-day Bible code, is it Planet X or Nibiru? Where does this story come from, and how does it relate to a doomsday scenario of December 21st, 2012?
Well, when we look back to the ancient civilizations, and I mean we have to go all the way back to the oldest of all civilizations. We're talking the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, and even the Mesopotamians. They wrote of a possible moon or star that would come screaming across our galaxy and eventually, quite possibly, either brush close to us on December 21st, 2012, or even possibly strike us. You see, even Nostradamus himself, if you recall, spoke of this mysterious object that we call Nibiru. According to what his prophecy stated, he said, there will appear towards the 7 stars of Ursa Minor and Polaris, not far from Cancer, the bearded star. Susa, Siena, Boeotia, great Rome will die, the night having vanished. He also wrote, the great star will blaze for 7 days. The clouds will cause 2 suns to appear. The huge dog will howl at night when the great pontiff will change lands. The Hopi Indians, some say that the 9th sign actually refers to the coming of Nibiru. And there are other parts of the stories that we have to piece together from those ancient civilizations who spoke of this mysterious star. Now the question is it a star? Is it a planet? If it's a planet, is it the 10th planet that some people have stated is the mysterious unknown planet, Planet X? Could that be Nibiru? What we're going to do right now is get into the earliest records of Nibiru itself, find out what is the story beneath its underbelly, what's really going on with Nibiru, and exactly how does it relate to us in 2012. The story of Nibiru was found on Sumerian tablets that dated way back into the ancient civilizations. Now, according to the stories on this Sumerian tablet, Nibiru is supposed to be a planet within our solar system, or what some people now are referring to as Planet X, or the 10th planet. Now, on this planet is supposed to be an ancient race of people known as the Anunnaki. Now, when we look at the Sumerian mythology, we find out that they themselves had a pantheon of good gods and bad gods, and that they came to the earth and created the human race. And when we look at the Anunnaki story, they also came from a planet that was known as Nibiru, or what's translated from the Sumerian as the planet of the crossing. And the reason it's called that is because it actually crosses through the path of Earth's orbit in relationship to the sun. And this is where we may also find another connection. You see, the Anunnaki was supposed to resemble a race of lizard-like people. And you can see the correlation here when we refer this to possible UFO sightings and lizard-like men who are races or alien races within these UFO vehicles. But we shall cover that later on in this DVD series. Now, when we go once again to the Assyrian and to the Babylonian stories, we find out that Nibiru is referred to in their culture as Marduk. Marduk was supposed to be a great hero of epic proportion who was the only one who could tame and defeat the ancient dragon, a 5-headed or 6-headed beast known as Tiamat. Now, planet Nibiru, whether it's a planet, a moon, or, as some would say, a dwarf star, a brown dwarf star, comes across the Earth's elliptical orbit once every 3,600 years. And that on Nibiru itself, on the planet, 1 year on Nibiru equals 3,600 years on planet Earth. And that supposedly the Anunnaki have an average lifespan of 432,000 years. Why then did the Anunnaki come to the Earth? Well, according to some, the Anunnaki needed gold to keep their civilizations going. So, they came to planet Earth and basically used man as an early slave race. And in order to do this, they had to literally alter primitive man and change him into the human race we are today. Then we could really fulfill their needs and their role for us as a primitive workforce, or if you would, a slave race for the Anunnaki. Let's assume for a second that it's not a brown dwarf star and that it's not a moon. Let's say it's actually a planet. Now, if we go by the premise that it's a planet, as a lot of people are postulating, as I stated before, it has a very long elliptical orbit. It takes approximately 3,600 years for Nibiru just to come around the sun just once. Just once. It takes 3,600 years for it to accomplish this. Now, in the past, Nibiru, or possibly one of its moons, had actually destroyed one of the planets in our solar system, and this is where we ended up with the asteroid belt that surrounded Jupiter. There are those people who say that this is how this asteroid belt came about and that this should be considered hard evidence. Now, Earth was much bigger at one time, way back when, according to different stories. And one time in Nibiru's crossing, it came so close to us that literally Earth was split into two pieces, and that what was left of the Earth after it had been split came back because of gravitational forces and formed a much smaller field, through gravity, and that what was left was just a smaller version of Earth. But once again, as I said before, this is just part of the stories that's related to us through the ancient civilizations on Sumerian tablets, through Assyrian and Babylonian myths. This is how, basically, we get the story of Nibiru and all that it entails. If Nibiru is going to arrive even close to the Earth at any time soon, we're going to feel the horrific effects of its arrival even before it's within our neighborhood. Accordingly, there will be felt massive tidal waves, possible earthquakes, volcanoes will erupt with a vengeance because Nibiru is closer and closer, and all civilization as we know it is going to be thrown into an absolute state of pure chaos because Nibiru has arrived. Now, does this explain the unprecedented amount of volcanic and tectonic activity that's been felt over the last year? Who's to say right now? But some would say this is only true because this mysterious moon, this Nibiru, is coming closer. Now, if we are to trust our eyes, according to a number of photos which I have come across, Nibiru is on the way. We take a look at this photo here, and right up here, as one of the Hopi prophecies stated about a blue star, this could very well be Nibiru. Now, there are other photos I would like to show you. Here, for instance, we have the arrival of Nibiru again. This one was taken on May of 2002, and just a couple months later, in September of the same year, this shows whatever it is getting a lot closer. Now, could this be Nibiru getting closer? Here we have another object, blue, according to some of the ancient prophecies, right here. Some say this is Nibiru. Now, if we look at it in a larger version, whatever it is is huge. Now, if something that big even comes close to the Earth's atmosphere, or even enough to affect our gravitational fields, yes, there could be worldwide natural disasters coming about that we should be getting prepared for. Now, during one of the eclipses in which the sun was being blotted out, we could see up here, because the sun was no longer shining, what some people are actually calling the arrival of Nibiru. So you see, Nibiru could very well be on the way. But is this really Nibiru, or is it something else? And if it's something else, what really is it?
Sumerians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Mesopotamians, they all mention one thing. They all mention this planet Nibiru, or Planet X. Maybe not verbatim, but they mentioned this planet coming.
Yeah.
Is it headed here 2012?
Okay. Using, once again, certain illustrations, diagrams, and photos, that was used throughout the series, we find out that Planet X supposedly has an orbit of 3,600 years to create an elliptical orbit, okay? And that, according to what some people have stated, and I'm using their photos now, that have supposedly, these photos represent the coming of Nibiru, okay? Now, if we go by this photo, well, this is supposed to be Nibiru on the way, right?
Right.
Okay, well, you notice how the sun is shining down and we see the reflection?
Mm-hmm.
Why is there no reflection here for Nibiru?
It's not close.
Or simply because this photo's been doctored. You notice here's a lens flare here. What is that doing there on top of that?
Right.
It doesn't
add up.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Now, according to this photo, well, here is the sun, here is Nibiru, and here is the moon. Excuse me, this is in using a blue filter. I don't know what this really is. No one does.
Right.
Sorry, this one can't use either. Now, according to this one, okay, over here we've got a photo of I think some people said that this was a chemtrail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the sun, and over here this is supposed to be Nibiru? That could be a reflection of anything.
Seems like somebody's just reaching.
Now, this one I like, because it really looks foreboding when you study it, but it's a fake. Again, take a look. Here's the sun, the sun, and over here this is supposed to be Nibiru.
Seems like it's getting closer quick.
Well, if it's that close, we're in more trouble than people realize. Now, this was taken by the Lick Observatory back in 2005, I think it was. You notice, sorry folks, that's a lens flare. They even said it was a lens flare. Here's another photo that people put up saying, aha, this is Nibiru. Something's wrong here. I thought Nibiru, according to all the prophecies, was supposed to be a blue star.
This one looks red.
Yeah. Sorry, can't go with that one. Oh, this one was from UCLA. Over here is supposed to be Nibiru, and this was the crescent moon.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is just an overexposure of the crescent moon. In other words, they just let the camera go and go and go and just overexposed it. Mm. So it looks like something's there that really never was there to begin with. Here we have the last one. This one, I could have used this one because I remember when I was in Alaska and we had these incredible aurora borealises. Now, this is supposed to be the moon once again, and here we have a maroon or Pink, Nibiru. Now, when you look at it close enough, you can see it's a reflection. It's a lens flare. The color could have easily changed because we're talking in Aurora Borealis now. Okay? Those cannot be taken as serious evidence of Nibiru's arrival. And quite honestly, some people believe that there's some type of cover-up going on here with NASA. Now, I do remember, of course, those movies. What was it? Where there was a comet or meteor on the way, and Armageddon was one of them, and then the other one.
There's been quite a few.
And you know, there was some type of cover-up. But the thing is, in the movies, if you follow the stories, they did tell us the truth ahead of time to where we could at least try to find hiding places or shelter or whatever, right? But the overwhelming evidence, you know, completely says it's not happening.
I know I'm not the one that's the past in the Illuminati, but it seems like there's a whole lot of organizations and people falling into the mold to hyping up this, to really pep about the doom and gloom.
It's another scare tactic of the Illuminati. It's a smokescreen. Now, if they are putting up this smokescreen for everyone to be panic-stricken by the, you know, almost the end of the year in 2012, that means they've got something planned further on down the line.